are getting ready to do some major rust repair. Now I'm talking major because you can actually buy these fenders aftermarket. And if you buy these fenders aftermarket, you got about a 50-50, I would say probably a 20% chance they're going to fit good and an 80% chance that they're going to be junk. So I have opted out to go ahead and repair the original factory fenders so we can keep all the original sheet metal on this car. Now the car that you're looking at, we're not using that car. All right, this car is actually the rotted, rusted body that we will be throwing into the scrap iron yard, because behind this car is a body that I just got done converting into a 67 GTO. It was a 67 Le Mans. I did some major rust repair on it to the floors. I've done major body work to it. It's all ready to go as far as paint. But I want to go ahead and work on these fenders because we've got to get these fenders done. So when we get the body on the car, we can go ahead and line everything up, make sure all the body lines are lined up. But the real deal is fixing these type of fenders is a very big job and it's very complicated. So I'm going to kind of walk you through on how to do that, show you the easy, simple ways of doing it, and hopefully you're going to learn. I'm going to get this job done, we're going to get this thing painted, and everybody comes out the winner.
Welcome to D.I.Y. Automotive School with my friend Pete and Minnie, the body shop girl. It's everything you need to know about cars and more.
If you look right here, you can see plain as day the fender's rotted out. This is the easiest and best way to replace a fender bottom to make sure that it accurately and professionally lines up with your vehicle. Now I want you to take a good look at this. This is actually our fender bottom that we purchased, and it looks like it's actually in a decent situation that says it might be a good part to use, but always remember it's aftermarket. So there's probably going to be some adjustment that's going to be made, or some type of situation that says we might have to do this to this, or cut this here and weld this here and do whatever we got to do to make it all work. Just because it's brand new doesn't mean that it's going to fit on there like a factory OEM piece. So one more thing I want you to pay attention to, you can actually buy these in two stages. You can buy them just like this, and if you look close, it's got the factory brace on the back, or you can buy it without the brace. Knowing what kind of car this was, I knew this brace was rotted out down here, so I went ahead and opted out and I got the brace. But if you look at this and you're telling yourself, how is he going to line all that up with that brace? I mean, you can kind of see what's going on here. All right, you can kind of basically see. And what we're going to do, we are actually going to repair this fender in two stages. Now, they went ahead and spot welded that brace on the bottom right here, and you can see that it's been spot welded. So what I'm going to go ahead and do with it, I'm going to go ahead and remove each one of these spot welds, and I want to take this brace off. I don't want that brace on there because I will put that on later after I go ahead and put the outer skin. Now, when I drilled those out, I didn't drill all the way through. What I did is I kind of busted the spot weld on the first layer of metal. I noticed that this brace, it was also not actually welded at the top here. So I'm hoping by what I did, we should be able to break those spot welds loose by basically doing it just like this. and set this to the side. We really don't need it right now, but we will keep it handy because we will need it once we get the skin on the car. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and kind of eyeball our piece out. And we can see that the body line's right here, the body line's right here, but we don't want to cut it all the way up here. We don't want to remove this much of this quarter panel. Let me get that out of the way. Okay, you see how I did that? I want to make sure you, the viewers watching this and learning, we don't want to use the whole panel if we don't have to. So to start our venture out on removing this rot and replacing this piece, we're going to go ahead and cut it way down here, and then we will go ahead and start fitting this on slowly. And before I get started, I want everybody to understand something here. I'm working on a car that is throwaway. We're going to be throwing these body panels in the trash. If you're doing this on a car that you're going to keep, all right, you need to go ahead and do something on getting the fender away from that door so you can work on it. And that's real important because we definitely don't want to mess up our doors as we are working on them. So I got me an electric cutoff wheel here, and like I said, we're randomly going to just take it off in this area right here. I don't want to go too high, and I noticed that my rust, all right, inside and out actually stops in this area right in here. So we're going to go ahead and try to get a nice straight line. And on this first initial cut, it really doesn't matter if it's straight or not, but we want to keep everything uniform because we're going to go ahead and cut it again once we get it all fit on there. Once we remove our fender bottom, you can see here's our brace. And where is our brace? This one, the factory one, actually looks a little bit different than the original one. I'm sorry, the factory one is the original one. The factory one looks different than the aftermarket one, but as long as it works for us and everything will fit, we're happy. Now that we got all this meat cut out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to fit this onto my panel. And like I said, I know that the rust stopped here. There's no more rust on it, no more rust holes. Let me make sure about that. Is that a rust hole right there? Or? Let me see. Okay, look what happened. We got rust all the way up to here. There is rust all the way up to there. So what do we got to do? My friend Pete, we got to go like this, and we got to try to fit this to the car, just like that. Do you see what's going on here? All right, we got to get this to fit on there, line everything up, and we got to figure out where we're going to cut it now. I just found rust right here. I'm not going to replace it here and then have to cut a hole out here when I got a whole panel. But do you kind of get the idea what's going on here? If it's not rusted up here, why use the whole panel? Just use what you got to use and don't worry about it. One thing I like about this aftermarket panel is that it's already got a flanged edge on it. And what a flanged edge is, you can basically see it's a recessed edge on one of the panels. So when you put that on here, this panel will actually lay on top of that panel, and then you can weld it all together and everything works out nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out what we got here. Let me get my scribe tool because we're going to need that. So we're going to kind of line this up, and I can kind of basically see what's going on here. And as you slide it up there, you'll feel it fit in place. And that's not in place. So here we go, right here. Okay, so I'm going to line this up where it should be, and that doesn't mean I'm going to cut it here. I'm just looking where this panel's going to end up. And I'm going to scribe it with my scribe tool. The main thing that we are concentrating on here is getting all this meat off so we can slide this on there, and then once that's slid on there, then we can get the fender back in place to line our bolt holes up on the bottom where it's supposed to end up. Alright, so now that we know where our rust is and we're on to our second cut, what I want to do is I want to take some tape, because I see that this line is not straight across, it's actually kind of at an angle, and I know I lined that up pretty damn close. Let's check it one more time here. Kind of seeing there where I'm lining up the two lines, because a lot of this has to do with eyeball action, especially when you're working with aftermarket parts. It's kind of like you got to eyeball everything, and then when I lay this on there, it kind of falls right in place like this, and it looks like I was actually a little bit low on that. I was actually a little bit low, so let me get my scribe tool one more time, and it looks like that's actually where it's going to go, right in that area right here, because I'm looking at this line here and it comes around to that line. So if I go like this, and once again, we don't have to be perfect, but we got to be accurate, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if you can see that scribe line right there, but the first one I did was way down here, and the second one I did was way up here. So now what I want to do is, if you look at this rust hole right here that I poked my tool in, okay, we want to go ahead and go above that line, right above the line. That's all we want to cut off, is right above that line right there. So to get a good, nice straight cut and to follow our line the best we can, we're going to go ahead and use some tape, and that'll be our guide mark where we're going to cut off. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my tape right here, and once again, we don't have to be perfectly accurate, but we got to be close. And then I'll take my cutoff wheel one more time. And another reason you want to cut a little bit off at a time is because if we screw this up, we still got all this meat that we can play with. Okay, so now we're getting closer to actually what's going on. Now I know there's no more rust up here. We got rid of all the rust. So let's go ahead and see what's going on now. And we're probably going to have the same problem like we were just having because of the circumstances that this is a very tight fit. But I'm going to go ahead and line my mark up where I know it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and get some C-channel vice grips, and I'm going to vice grip it on here. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to fit the fender underneath and see where the bottom is lining up with our holes. Okay, so I'm going to line up my scribe mark just like I made. I want to make sure that's all in line. I'm going to take some C-channel vice grips just like you're watching me here, and then you can actually see this moving as I clamp it on there. Alright, so I know that's on the line right there. Let's look up underneath and see how this fender is going to fit on our car. Okay, if we look up under the car right here, you can see where the fender is supposed to bolt on. I want everybody to take a good look at that. And you can see that's rotted out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to twist this fender around because I'm going to have to manipulate it to fit in there. And then as I'm doing that, I got to get this body line where it actually looks like it's supposed to be. And then once I'm done with that, then I'll see if it's going to work. And hopefully we can get this lined up where we can get it to work, because that's what we want, is for it to work. You can see how the fender's hanging down right here. Don't pay attention to that when you're working on these, because if you notice, looking up the door, you can see the gap is just like closed in. So when I push on that fender, it's going to open that gap up and get it to where we need it to be. So I kind of got the camera in the best angle I could go, and I'm laying over here on the ground. So when I take the fender and I roll it around just like this. And then when I push up on it where the fender's supposed to go, I can see that the gap is starting to look a lot better on the outside. I know you can't picture that, but it's really starting to look right. What really sucks with this is that this body is so rotted out that I can't even get the bolt out of that fender and actually line it up and bolt it in. And we also know that there will be shims in this thing. I mean, that's just natural, and that's what these cars were designed for, but we got to get the fender where it's going to line up with that bolt hole and then also have a good gap down here. So let me figure this out. You're getting the idea of what I'm doing here, and then we'll get back to the situation once I get everything lined up, and we'll come back and we'll explain to you what I had to do. All right, we're up here on top of the fender now. I went ahead and removed the fender, and I want to show you some stuff here, but before we get to it, I want to let you know that when you're doing a job like this, it's very important to have that fender attached to the vehicle, because it's always better to attach it to the vehicle and make sure everything's lining up before you actually line it up like we're doing right here. And you can see I went ahead and added one more pair of channel locks to the situation so this doesn't move in place. But let me show you something here, and then we'll move down the line. Now, normally on aftermarket parts, everybody knows, if you're an avid watcher of D.I.Y. Auto School, my friend Pete doesn't like them, and 99% of them, or should I say 80% of them, ain't worth a shit, 20% are. This happens to be a piece that is actually a very good piece, and I'm going to show you why. If you follow the brace, the original brace, you can see how it follows all these contours. See how this contour has a dip in it, this contour has a dip. We get up here, this has a rollout right here, so does the panel itself. So this is a very well built piece, it's a nice piece, and it's a piece that's going to work. So we know by everything I just showed you here that we're precisely, accurately, pretty much in line where we can go ahead and finish this job out and put this fender extension on. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scribe tool, and I'm just going to scribe it just like this, and I'm going to get right next to that edge, because I want to make sure that I get a nice, good, accurate line. And the reason I'm using a scribe tool, if I used a pencil or some type of other, or a magic marker, it's not going to get as close as that little point right there. Now, another thing you could use if you wanted is a ballpoint pen, but I like to use a scribe tool, and that's what I'm going to stick with. And if you look real close as I move the panel, you can see there's a scribe line where we're going to cut it. So I'm not going to cut the line right where I drew it. Remember I told you I'm going to go ahead and add a ½ inch onto that? That's exactly what we're going to do on this, and then I will cut it off at that line. So now that we got this marked, let's go ahead and work on getting this brace out of the way so we can actually get our panel on there. Remember I removed the aftermarket brace. Let's get that up here and see what we're going to do. So here's our aftermarket brace right here. And if I set that in there, I'm going to go ahead and cut it up into this area here, and then we can always trim this to fit later. Alright, I went ahead and removed that brace, got it out of the way. Let's go ahead on cutting our panel off so we can get that mounted. The next thing I'm going to take my flange tool, and I'm going to go ahead and put a flange on this piece right here so it looks just like that. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and clean that edge up because it's kind of tacky looking. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and flange that out. And I will tell you that this flange tool right here, I purchased that at a place called Northern Tool, and it's the best flange tool that I've owned in 40 years. So if you are looking for a good flange tool, find this design here instead of the trigger kind. The trigger ones are very cheap and inexpensive. This one here has proved itself to be an awesome flange tool. I don't even know what the brand is, but the design is much better than the other one. Okay, now that I got my flange, remember that scored line that I made right there? I'm going to go ahead and line that up, and I can see that I can't, and the reason is because this actually is going to fit on the outside of our panel, not the inside. So what's that telling you? That's telling me, by them putting that flange on there, basically it screwed us up, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. I'm going to go ahead and line my mark up, just like that, and then I'm going to take my scribe tool one more time, and then I'm going to go ahead and butt weld the ends and flange weld the center. Alright, so now I'm going to be able to slide this in here, and I got to square this up. You can see that doing this type of work is very, very time consuming and takes a lot of patience. And now I have went ahead and I made my flange. I'm going to go ahead and tack weld it, put a couple tack welds on this side, and then what I'll do is I'll turn it over, and then we'll see what it looks like. Alright, so I got it tacked on this side. Let's flip the fender over and let's see what we got. Alright, now that we got the fender turned over, I see that everything's lining up really nice. What I want to do now is I want to put 4 or 5 tack welds on her. I don't want to tack weld it up all the way across because I want to go ahead and get my brace in here. Alright, now that we got our fender bottom put onto the fender, we know where it's going to go and everything. Let's get our brace out, let's fit that in. So I'm going to take my brace, like I said, I'm going to slide it down in place, and you can see how it's going. I see where it's going to go, and it looks like it's going to fit really nice. And before I do anything, I want to line my spot welds back up, and then I'm going to clamp this on to the fender, and then that way I'm going to get a nice, precise, accurate place where this thing's going to be ending up. With that clamped onto the fender where I want it, I got 2 choices. I can go ahead and leave this whole piece in here just like it looks, go ahead and weld that up, or what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut it back here, and I'll show you that here in a second. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all that meat that I'm not going to use and weld it onto the vehicle. Alright, so we just took a bunch of meat off of our fender brace. When we slide it in there, normally this is basically where you would stop. You go ahead and weld it up right here. Alright, and you'd be done with it. Spot weld it on the fender here if you want. Get your spot welds back here. But since this piece fits so good, what I'm going to do is I am actually going to cut this one off at the edge right here where it is. And I am going to try to butt weld it or get it really close. Okay, so now when we stick it down in here, we can see that when I weld that on there, it's going to give it a nice butt weld. And we're also, at the same time, going to line our spot welds up where they were. And I'm going to have to go like this first. Actually, I'm going to have to weld that on there first. So let me get that welded on there, and then we'll go ahead and re-spot weld it up here. Okay, what I did is I went ahead and butt welded the brace. It's all welded in. What I'll do now is I'll weld down each end here. And then once I get that done, get on the other side and we'll go ahead and weld that up, and then we'll take a look at it and see what it looks like when it's all done. Alright, what we're doing here is I showed you how to install a fender bottom on a classic car such as our GTO, but I wanted to bring you back because I want to show you another situation. Now, we did have a full fender bottom. Remember that fender bottom I put on the other car? So I went ahead and bought two of them, but on this particular fender, the only rust that we found on it wasn't rusted all the way across. The only rust was in this area right here. And if we look at this area, why would we want to replace the whole fender, all right, all the way up to here, if it was only rusted in this area right here? There's no sense in doing it. It's ridiculous and it's absurd. And this is what you do when it comes to panel replacement. Once again, my friend Pete is showing you, that just because you get a panel that comes all the way up to this line here doesn't mean that you replace the whole thing unless you really, really necessarily have to, like we did on our other fender for the right-hand side. This is our left-hand fender. So I went ahead and I cut the rust out. Once I cut the rust out, I went ahead and measured the section that I needed, and I oversized that by 1/4 of an inch. Then I cut that out and I laid that on top of our fender. Now, keep in mind now, this is an aftermarket piece. This is not factory original. All right, the body lines are not going to be identically the same. You're going to have to hammer and dolly your way through there to replace that, which that's what I'm going to have to do. But I went ahead and measured it 1/4 inch bigger. Then I put my piece on top of the fender and I scribed that out. I scribed the fender out and then I recut the fender. Okay, I recut the fender to fit this piece right here. Now another thing is the bottom. Okay, this is our fender brace on the bottom. Remember, I went ahead and bought that fender brace. I went ahead and bought the patch panel with the fender brace. And here's our fender brace right here. And then if I flip this over, we're going to see where I removed the rotted piece. And here's our rotted brace section right here. You can see that right there. That's our piece that I cut off. And then speaking of rot, here's the piece of the fender that I removed. All right, this is actually the fender piece that I removed that I'm welding on now. But those are the two pieces that I removed, and I didn't end up using the whole section. Now, what I'll do on the rest of this fender, I'm going to go ahead and spot sandblast this to get rid of all this surface rust. And this isn't rusted through, this just got some heavy surface rust on it. But I will spot sandblast that to remove that, and then it'll all be like brand new. But you can see by looking at it that by the time I graft my brace back in here to add on to this one, it's going to be a nice repair, and it'll last many, many years. So whichever way you end up doing your repair on your fender bottom, whether you're replacing a little section or you got to replace the whole section that gets sent to you, always remember to take your time and always precisely think about the situation before you start cutting and welding. So this is basically called a patch repair. And on this fender right here, this is basically a section repair. That means I use the whole section to repair the fender. And you can see back here, one more time, let's go ahead and look that over. You can see the brace that I added to it right here. And I still got to do some cleanup on it. I still got to get it where it's a usable fender. I got to do some heavy grinding here, minor body work, and then this fender will be done. I showed you how to bolt the fender onto your car to precisely measure it all out so everything lines up. And now I'm showing you how to patch the fender for only what you need. This is Pete, my friend Pete, your friend Pete, working on the GTO, getting the GTO done. We got many fenders here to choose from. We're trying to keep the original parts. We don't want to use aftermarket stuff on these cars. Stay away from the aftermarket stuff. Fix what you got. You know, even if it's got some other major rust somewhere, try to repair that. To use that original sheet metal than relying on aftermarket parts to build your car. Right here, Minnie the Body Shop Girl, 1967 GTO conversion from a Le Mans, and it's going to be a beautiful car when we're done. We got a flat tire over there. We paid $35 for these tires each, and it's flat.
It wasn't flat yesterday. Oh.
Okay. Are you going to be taking that tire back to get it fixed or whatever? That was a hassle. 35 bucks for a tire won't even hold air for one day. We got to go. Take it easy. And hopefully your fender repair job will look better than this factory hood. I don't think we're going to be fixing this. I'll get a good gander at that, Minnie. Yeah, this one here is going to need an aftermarket hood. This is not fixable by any means whatsoever.
Nothing to hook the hinge to.
Exactly. We'll be using this for scrap iron. We got to go. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching D.I.Y. Automotive School. Classes don't stop till you know everything.